Last time in The Name of This Book is Secret by Pseudonymous Bosch, we uncover that Cass and Max Ernest have found a mysterious there we go. Have found a mysterious box in a briefcase form called the Symphony of Smells. The Symphony of Smells seems very important because it belonged to a late magician, and there seemed to be a lot of like mystery around him and unsurety as to exactly how he died, or even why he died, or if he was even dead. The two children decided that they would Cassandra and Max Ernest decided that they would investigate, because if this truly was a cry for help, they wanted to be there to bring that help. So in order to do that, though, they had to trick their parents into thinking that they were at each other's houses working on a science project, when in reality they went to the late professor's house and went through his things, which all happened to be gone because the realtor had come and taken everything from the house. But they did find a secret room where they uncovered not only a leather-bound journal from the late magician, as well as a unsightly, actually they were quite striking, um, a striking couple who also appeared to be after this journal and the late magician, and possibly the cause of his death. So, with that, Cass and Max Ernest get back to their houses. Last week, Cass and Max Ernest got back to their house, realizing that the Symphony of Smells is now gone, and the notebook, the journal, is empty except for a poem that is very likely a code in how to find the rest of the words in the journal. So let's figure out what will happen now. Chapter 11, The Magician's Notebook. All these here. Okay. For most people, Monday mornings are a source of dread. Although Cass was uncontroversial, was oh, although Cass was unconventional in many ways, including her attitude towards most days of the week, she too often felt a sense of doom on Monday mornings. When she faced the prospect of the long school week ahead. But on this Monday morning, on the school bus, Cass could hardly think about school. She was too excited. That afternoon, the investigation would resume. Slipping down low in her seat, out of view of the other student passengers, she pulled the magician's notebook out of her backpack and examined it in her hands. The notebook was larger than the common school variety, and it was flatter. It had no rings and was more like a binder than what you'd usually think of as a notebook. The leather cover was brown and shiny and embossed. Cass noticed now, with a familiar Art Navajo design, the same swirling vines and flowers that decorated the Symphony of Smells. But Cass was certain that the notebook was not nearly as old. The magician must have handmade it to match. Maybe when the investigation was over, she could ask her grandfathers about it. As she flipped through the pages of the notebook, she accidentally discovered something about them. All of the pages were doubled pages, folded over on themselves. After a little fiddling, she released the pages from their binding and opened it up like an accordion. She stared in amazement. Unwittingly, she had figured out what underneath meant. The answer wasn't buried underground at all. It had been right in front of them all along. The magician's story was written on the reverse side of the notebook pages, underneath them. The rest of the bus ride was pure torture. All she could think about was what was written on the undersides of the notebook. She wanted nothing more than to start reading, but she knew that wouldn't be fair to Max Ernest. As annoying as he was, she reminded herself, they were collaborators. She had to wait. Hoping to catch Max Ernest before he went to class, Cass started looking for him as soon as she got to school. Unfortunately, she couldn't walk very fast. Something was standing in the middle of the hall, impeding traffic. When she got closer, she saw what that something was Benjamin Blake. Oblivious to the crowds of students around him, Benjamin stared at the paintings on the wall, as though he couldn't quite believe that they were real. The funny thing was, the paintings were his, as was the plaque next to them, declaring him the winner of the Young Leonardo's contest. As they were congratulatory letters from the mayor and the governor, as well as, well, you get the idea. As Cass tried to pass him, Benjamin muttered something. It sounded like, "I smell a hint. Dip your ice cream." "I don't have any ice cream." Does it look like I do?" Cass responded, who hated mumbling even when she wasn't in a hurry. "By the way, in case you haven't noticed, you're in everybody's way. Besides, you probably shouldn't stand in front of your own paintings like that. It looks kind of conceited." Benjamin reddened and rushed off in the direction Cass came from. Cass continued down the hall, knowing she had been a little insensitive. It wasn't Benjamin's fault that he was the way he was, but she didn't have time to worry about his feelings. She had to find Max Ernest. She hadn't made it much further, and her path was blocked by Miss Johnson, who was talking to some other grown-ups and showing them around the school. Cass was about to push past them when she stopped cold, her heart beating a mile a minute. It was them. She was positive. She recognized their hair and the gloves on their hands at her school. Cass hung back a few feet, shielding her face with her backpack in case Dr. L or Miss Mavis turned around. Well, I guess that's all the questions we have," Miss Mavis was saying with her terrible tinkle. "We're glad to see you have such talented student and staff. Thank you for showing us your time. Thank you so much for your time," added Dr. L in his recognizably unrecognizable accent. "You're very generous." "Not at all," said Miss Johnson, beaming at them. "It's wonderful to see such involved and concerned parents. I'm sure your son will be very happy at our school." "Their son?" thought Cass. "What son?" Dr. L turned, so Cass had to duck out of sight. When she looked again, they were gone, and Miss Johnson was walking towards her. Cass waited for the principal, then started walking alongside her. Miss Johnson was a fast walker, and it was hard to keep up. "Those people, did they ask about me?" "Cassandra, when you want to speak to me, you say, 'Excuse me, Miss Johnson.' Then wait until you have my attention." "Excuse me, Miss Johnson. Do I have your attention now?" "Yes, you do. And no, they did not ask about you. Why would they? They're parents of a prospective student. They were asking about our art program." "They were lying," Cass said fiercely. "They're horrible. I don't even think they're really parents." "Cassandra!" What an awful thing to say! About... What an awful thing to say about people you don't even know! Did you notice how they were wearing gloves, even though it's hot out? Some people consider it polite to wear gloves in company. Personally, I think it's a very refined habit. I may just start wearing them myself, said Miss Johnson, looking hard at Cass from under her large turquoise hat. It is all because I... Is this all because I wouldn't order that evacuation you wanted? You know, if I shut down the school every time you thought something was wrong, nobody in here would get an education. Yeah, I'm sorry, Miss Johnson. Bye. Cass left Miss Johnson shaking her head and hurried down the hall, but it was too late. They were gone. Cass spent a good 10 minutes, at least 5 of those minutes, being past the beginning of the first period, searching the school inside and out, to no avail. Not only couldn't she find Dr. L and Miss Mauvais, she couldn't even find Max Ernest. Just as she was trying to figure out what excuse she could give her teacher for being late, she happened to look through the school's back gate. Across the street, Dr. L and Miss Mauvais were slipping into a waiting limousine. The limousine was painted blue, so dark it could almost be black, and decorated with tiny jewel-like stars. Emblazoned in gold across the door was the image of a rising sun and the words, "Midnight Sun." The whole vehicle shimmered brightly, and it looked enchanted. I'll go ahead and show you a picture. Dun, dun, dun. As the limousine drove out of sight, a boy's face was briefly visible, staring out the back window. Cass started back, imagining for a second that she had caught the boy's eye. Why did he look so familiar? Was Miss Johnson right? Was that their son? Was it possible that they were really parents? Cass dismissed the idea as soon as it popped in her head. She remembered the awful things they had screamed at her and Max Ernest. No parent would ever say things like that to a kid. No real parent. By a lucky coincidence, Cass and Max Ernest both had study hall that same morning after first period. As soon as she saw him, Cass pulled Max Ernest over to the desk that occupied the most private corner of the school library. Speaking so fast that all her words blurred together, she filled him in on how the Symphony of Smells was stolen in the firehouse and somehow Saturday, and I know that it had to be Miss Mauvais and Dr. L because Sebastian went all totally crazy, and when they showed up at the school tours this morning, can you believe it? Miss Johnson and Mr. Johnson was taking them on a tour. She said they were prospective parents, and I saw them leaving with a boy who was in the back of the limousine and the boy of the Midnight Sun. Most people wouldn't have been able to understand her. Max Ernest was such a fast talker himself that he had no trouble. They have a kid? I don't believe it, he said. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, said Cass, slowing down only because she had exhausted herself. I think the parent thing was just to lay low, or was just a lie, a cover story, so they could look for us. But then, who was the kid in the limousine? Hey, I almost forgot. I figured out what the underneath means. It means underneath the pages. All the writing is in the notebook. It was just hidden. Wow. Did you read it? No, I waited for you. Cass didn't say, I waited because we're collaborators, and Max Ernest didn't say, thanks, that means a lot to me, but each could tell what the other was thinking. said Cass after a moment. You don't always talk so much. Every once in a while you're a little quiet, like now. You're right, said Max Ernest amazed. And I wasn't even trying. How about that? So what did the new doctor say about your condition, anyway? He said he wouldn't know for sure as long as my parents were living together, because of my family situation was too stressful. Really? So your parents are going to have to stop living together? No, they just got into a big fight about it. But at least they were talking to each other. Cass and Max Ernest had to be quiet for a minute because they got a warning look from the librarian. But when the librarian left, study hall was over. The study hall operated on an honor system. They wasted no time at all opening the notebook. They could now see that, far from being blank, the entire book was full of the magician's handwriting. It was just that the notebook was inside out, or rather outside in. Judging by the slant of the letters, he had written very fast. Whatever he was writing about must have been very important. While Max Ernest leaned in close, Cass read to him in a whisper, her face growing increasingly grave with every sentence. Dear reader, if you are reading these words, I know 2 things about you. You are brave enough to hold in your hands this notebook, a notebook for which all over the world villains are searching. And you are clever enough to decipher a riddle, the riddle on the other side of the pages. Both these qualities you will need in the days ahead. My life is in danger. For this reason, I write. No, do not fear the death. I do not fear the death. I am an old man, and I have survived worse things. But I do not want to die without first making right an ancient wrong. Do you know the expression, that ignorance is bliss? Think on it well. Some secrets are not meant to be known. But once you know, you can never forget them. If certain people discover that you have learned the things that I am about to tell you, let me just say this, that it is the safest for you to stop reading now and leave the notebook far away from this place you call home. If instead you keep reading, please, I beg you, repeat to no one my story. Here, Cass put the notebook down and looked at Max Ernest. He was still being unusually quiet. Well? Cass prompted him. Well, what? Max Ernest asked. Well, should I keep reading? He has a weird way of writing, Max Ernest said, as if to answer the question. I think maybe he's foreign. I mean, no. Do you want me to keep reading? No, it doesn't mean no. So it means yes. Yes, I guess. Oh, well, I think I should keep reading too, said Cass. I just thought, if you thought it was too dangerous. I'm not scared, said Max Ernest. I just think he sounds foreign. I'm not scared either. So I'll keep reading then. Okay. So keep reading then. Okay, I will. Cass picked up the notebook and coughed. Just the way Grandpa Larry did before he started a story. For some reason, her throat felt dry, and then she began to read. Although I am reluctant, for obvious reasons, I think I must continue recording the magician's story. You see, the magician's story goes straight to the heart of mine. It is not too much to say my story would not exist without this. You and I, then, will read over the shoulders of Max Ernest and Cass. Before we do, I suggest you take a break. If you need to go to the bathroom, this is a good time. If you're sleepy, Go to bed and save the next chapter for tomorrow. For the magician's story, you must have all your wits about you. No wandering minds allowed. Chapter 12. The Story of the Guillermo Brothers. Dun, dun, dun! Chapter 12. The Story of the Guillermo Brothers. Part 1. Are you ready? Rested? Alert? Or did you just skip ahead because you couldn't wait? If so, I'd like to point out that by reading by a flashlight under a blanket is always a good way to tackle the most difficult and dangerous parts of a book. I'd also suggest that you have a snack handy or some gum to chew. Otherwise, you might find yourself biting your fingernails until they bleed. Okay, have you all your reading supplies at hand? Here it is. Then, the magician's story in his own words. La storia di la mia vita, the story of my life, by Petro Guillermo. Never trust a magician. These words we use only to divert your attention. Look at my pretty scarf, we say. So, you do not know what you see out of sleight of hand when the rabbits disappear. But I write now as a man, not as a magician. And I promise, my story is true. How I wish it were not. For the story of tragedy of my childhood, and of the terrible secret that was brought nothing but misery and death. My brother Luciano and I were both in a small town in Italy, in the time between wars. We were twins, what they call in English the fraternal twins, not the identical twins. A distinction that is very useless, I think. Yes, if you look up at us closely, there are many differences between us, like the birthmark on the back of Luciano's neck that resembles so perfectly a crescent moon. But Luciano and I, we were identical in our hearts. When we turned 9 years old, our lives, as they say, turned upside down. A terrible man rose to power in Italy, and our whole family, it was in danger. This terrible man was the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. As a child, Mussolini was expelled from school for stabbing another student and for throwing a pot of ink at his teacher. His personality never improved, but his luck sure did. He went on to rule Italy with an iron fist, making everyone in the country, including all of the teachers, swear their loyalties to obey him without question. Our parents, they were being watched. But they managed to find the passage for Luciano and me to a boat to America. They promised to join us as soon as they could, but we knew that would not be very soon, or maybe ever. It was an awful thing to leave home at such a young age, but at least we had each other. During the time we were making the crossing of the Atlantic Ocean, we never left each other's side. As a parting gift, our father had given to us an old book of magic tricks, and we spent all of our days practicing card tricks and amusing the crew on the boat. Every night, as we went to sleep, we fantasized about our lives in America, and how we would become world-famous magicians. Our mother, she had a cousin in Kansas City. We were very excited to be going where we heard of there because we had heard of the story of the Wizard of Oz, and we knew Kansas was full of tornadoes and the adventure. What we did not know, until it was too late, was that part of Kansas City was in Missouri, only 60 miles from the capital of Kansas, Topeka, where we happened to get off of the train. it was the nighttime. It was the nighttime, and we were cold and tired, and we had been wandering through the streets of Topeka for several hours when we saw a marvelous spectacle lit up in front of us. A circus. Also, having no money, we could not enter the circus tent, the Big Top, as it was called. A little known fact about Missouri is that Mussolini. Little known fact about Mussolini is he was also a novelist. To me, that makes perfect sense. The writer of a novel is like the dictator of a novel. He makes all his characters do exactly what he wants them to do and say exactly what he wants them to say. But please don't draw any conclusions about the kind of people who write novels. After all, not all novelists are power-hungry madmen. Some are power-hungry mad women. But we found a flat. Alas, having no money to enter the circus tent, the Big Top, as it was called. But we found a flap in the tent through which we could watch the horses galloping and the clowns juggling, and even a mangy old tiger jumping through a hoop of fire. What most impressed us was the ringmaster, so magnificent in the top hat and tails. We didn't speak much English, but we could tell that what he was saying by the tone of his voice, and by the screams and cheers of the crowd. At one point, I could have sworn he saw us, and he winked at us. It was as if he knew us, and although we were outside and we had not paid for the tickets, we were the most important member of all. When the show ended, we followed with the rest of the circus audience out into the midway. This was the old-fashioned traveling circus. All of the great sideshows and attractions, like fire-eating strongman, a fat lady with a beard, which we later learned was fake, and a fakir, also actually a white man dressed up to look like an Indian swarmy. Being amateur magicians, we wanted to look inside all of the booths, but the carnival workers, the carnies, they were watching us as if they were the hawks. We had such a great hunger that the smells of all the cotton candy and the popcorn and the peanuts and the almost too much to suffer. And then we spied a food cart that had been left unattended, and a row of red candy apples glistening under a string of lights, ripe for the taking. Quickly, we each grabbed an apple and darted into the shadows behind the cages of the animals. What luck! But as soon as we sank our teeth in, those apples, they were ripped out of our hands. Shocked, we looked up to see a grinning down at us, a tough old carny. He was missing a tooth of his, and believe me, that grin was a scary thing to see. Not only do you help feed nice of you to help to feed the animals, he said, tossing our apples into the cage of the tiger. Oh no, he laughed as he watched the tiger swat aside our apples like a cat in a ball of yarn. She doesn't like the apples. Them apples is just to give her the smell of the human, I mean. As he said this, he grasped us by the scruff of our necks, and he made a big show of sniffing us around like we were the dinner. Then he dragged us towards the door of the cage of the tiger, and we screamed and we struggled, but it was useless. His grip was so strong. By now, we were crying and pleading for our lives in Italian. We thought we truly had reached our end. Goodbye. Goodbye, I said to Luciano. No, not goodbye. Just arrivederci, he said, looking up towards the sky. We will be together Always. Yes, together always, I said, trying to be as brave as he was. I touched my finger to the crescent moon of his birthmark, and I closed my eyes. Let go of them, Sammy. It was the Ringmaker, walking towards us. Don't worry, boys. That old tiger doesn't got any more teeth than Sammy does. She couldn't hurt a fly. Eyes twinkling, he said we should know better than to run away like that with the stolen goods. When you steal something, you should walk away slowly, he instructed us. Otherwise, you attract attention. As a punishment for our poor attempt at thievery, the ringmaster ordered us to help Sammy clean the cages of the animals. Very relieved to be alive, we worked hard so that even Sammy was happy with us. The next morning, exhausted, but also exhilarated, we were sitting outside of the ringmaster's trailer with his three-year-old daughter, while inside his wife prepared the breakfast. To pass the time, we took out our deck of cards and practiced tricks, which the ringmaster's daughter seemed to find extremely amusing. We did not know it, but the ringmaster was watching us from the trailer. When we finished, he applauded. Lucy knows a good trick when she sees it, he says, pointing at his daughter. We try out all of our acts on her. After Luciano and I ate all of the bacon and the flapjacks, which is what the food always tastes like so much better in the why is it that food always tastes so much better in the outside? The ringmaster instructed us to help his crew pack up the tents. He never asked us where we came from or where we were going. He just assumed that we would be traveling with the circus. And so we did. If you are one of the lucky ones, or is it unlucky, people that are meant for the life of the circus, it is as natural as the migrating is for the geese, or as the hibernating is for the bear. After reading the last sentence, Cass closed the magician's book. She had to stop reading, not because the story had ended, but because the bell had rung. Actually, it had started ringing around the time the Petro brothers were being fed to the tiger, and if Cass and Max Ernest didn't move very quickly, they were going to be late for their next classes. Max Ernest, in an unusual rebellious mood, suggested that they skip their classes altogether and continue reading, but Cass pointed out that they might attract unwanted attention that way. After all, neither of them was in the habit of ditching class, so they reluctantly agreed to postpone reading until lunch, when they would re-meet behind the gym. Chapter 14. The Story of the Guillermo Brothers, Part 2. Remember, guys, no matter what happens in life, keep those little goals and those big dreams. Bye, guys!